What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and yesterday I did my ESPN Esports reaction. It's still as bad as always, their rankings, that is, and their ability to write. So make sure you check that out so we can all make fun of them and laugh at them together. We will not be making fun of anyone on this video, so I'm not making fun of Billy today because Billy actually knows what he's doing. So, Billy, how's it going?
Yeah, that's debatable, but I'm doing well. Glad to be back.
Got to give the benefit of the doubt, especially in the beginning of the video. Like,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
could
We'll
only
see. We'll
go.
see. We'll see if you still feel that way when we get to the end. But
Exactly.
I'll do my best.
So we'll try to move this. We'll try to move this along and get into the top 10 at the end of the video. We're gonna go region by region in the beginning. So I am using Tier Maker now to make it a little bit easier for people to see what is going on. So if we're gonna start off in North America, Billy, is there anything that you want to say about North America first, or should I just go through my rankings and then I'll give you the floor?
I get the watching the weekend's games on Saturday. I thought you seemed like a genius coming out of last week, even calling the specific bang pop off game. And then Sunday, they just all fell apart. But that was sort of the story across the board in the LCS on Sunday. So I don't think it was your fault.
I agree. Definitely not my fault that things went poorly, but it is my fault that things went correctly in the beginning. And like the whole thing is, I was thinking about this the other day on one of my other videos. I was talking about how I think the opinion of the LCS and the LEC would be much higher if they played 3 games as opposed to 1 game, because you'd have so much more film. You'd be able to see them do things well, do things poorly, and it'd be a lot better. But because of the way that they do their broadcast and everything, it'll never happen again. Like they did at one point have multi-game series, but there's a lot that the LCS could really do to improve their product, but we're not here to discuss that. We're here to discuss the teams. So first up, I'll explain the tiers, how they're going to be used moving forward. So D is bad in the region, and then everything else is relative to that point. So like if there's a gap between teams, I try to make it clear in this. So the worst team in the North American LCS right now, in my opinion, is CLG. It's not just about their performance in recent games. It's about their talent, their long-term my ideas about them long term, and also how they're performing right now. So CLG, I think, is the worst team in North America. Dig, slightly better. I like Dardoch a lot. When he's not playing Karthus jungle, he's very impactful, especially on a champion like Graves. Pulled off another win on Graves this weekend. Immortals, if I had to have a bad team play for my life, I would probably choose Immortals out of these 3 teams because they're the most consistent and like a sure thing with Xmithy. It just gives me some like kind of confidence in the team and that they're going to play the macro game correctly. So it always gives them outs, even against good teams. In the next tier, we have 100 Thieves and Golden Guardians. These 2 teams are relatively close. A lot of people are high on 100 Thieves because they brought in Contracts and Poom, and they have Someday. They were able to beat C9, but overall, I think that they're just not a very good team. They're basically C9 light. Like, they want to play that playstyle, but they're nowhere near as talented, and that's a big problem when you're playing that playstyle. Golden Guardians, better than them in most positions. I think Someday's better than Haunter in the top lane, but I'd rather have Closer, Demonte, and then the bot lanes are pretty close. In the next tier, we have another cluster of teams. We have FlyQuest, TSM, and Evil Geniuses. So Evil Geniuses like plummeted in the ESPN esports rankings. They're like in the 30s now in the world after like a 1-1 weekend and like beating C9 and having a close match against TL and like all these other good results. Pretty bizarre. But FlyQuest, I don't like FlyQuest. They still have the question marks in the bot lane. TSM's a good team. Evil Geniuses is a good team, more talented than TSM in my opinion, and can compete in the North American playoffs. Then we have Team Liquid and Cloud9. So I know Team Liquid beat Cloud9, but I'm not changing my mind about the talent of those 2 teams based on 1 game. Billy, what are the EGOT rankings telling us about the North American LCS?
They're pretty similar to your rankings. Um, Certainly in terms of the tiers, with some slight differentiation in the order. And I think once again, or still, a bit different view on Evil Geniuses. And one question I had there for you is when I think it was the LCS broadcast the first week that Golden Blue played.
Yeah.
I think it was a team statement that certain comps or matchups they might play Jizuke if they thought it was, you know, sort of getting that roaming mid laner was a better fit. Do you think that's puffery, or do you think that is something they could do going forward?
I don't think it's puffery. I think it's an outright lie. And the reason I think it's a lie is because that would require them to play Kumo in the top lane over Huni. And there is no...
Why is that?
So, like, in the North American LCS, there are import slots and domestic slots. So you have to have 3 players from North America on your roster at all times. And then you can have 2 players from outside of North America. Huni is going to become a North American resident at the end of this season because he spent a certain amount of time in the North American LCS. But until that point, you need to have 3 North Americans. Jizuke is from Europe. Kumo, I think, is technically a North American resident. And then Huni is from Korea. Golden Glue is from North America. So in order to swap them out, you have to change up 2 positions, not just 1 position.
Yeah. I didn't know any of that. That's interesting. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay, so nothing else?
So I guess just quickly going through the order. Immortals is at the bottom, then Dignitas, then CLG. Next tier up, Evil Geniuses, then Golden Guardians, then Team Liquid. I was fiddling here while you were talking to try to figure out why they are so low. But yeah, the EGOT rankings do not like Team Liquid. The EGOT rankings, and I think I may agree. I don't know. I can't decide if I think 100 Thieves is decent or just mediocre. But they're next. They're 4th. TSM 3rd. FlyQuest, which the model has been high on, all year really. And then C9 still with a very comfortable lead over 2nd place. They've come back down from their peak, I guess 3 weeks ago at this point, but certainly still the biggest gap between 1st and 2nd in any of the 4 leagues.
Yeah, so one thing I guess we should mention is I think that EGOT does a pretty good job at identifying teams that are good for DraftKings, because it's like these gigantic goal differentials are normally followed by like a high kill total or something like that. So I think,
and that's certainly that's absolutely right. I mean, that's what it was built for. And just sort of the wins are most of your winning plays on DraftKings are going to be on winning teams, and so there's just the correlation there.
Yeah. So C9 is a team that I would expect to be overly favored by EGOT. Not necessarily a bad thing if you're using it for DraftKings. FlyQuest, their playstyle lends itself to these high score games. 100 Thieves also lends itself to high score games. CLG does as well. Like, they lose a lot, but they are the kind of team that can kind of force the opponent to kill them a ton and like contest objectives. So those 4 teams I think are really the best DraftKings plays in general. Like outside of their winning chances.
Yeah, it's a great point, and actually something that I've been thinking about the past couple days. We've talked a couple times on these streams about Rogue Warriors, and I think they're another team that fits into this on the other side of the coin. I think the EGOT rankings, sort of just saying what you said differently, really reward teams that win, that play fast and win fast, and really crushes teams that play fast and lose fast. And so when you have a team like Rogue Warriors, where they're just, I think sort of an average team, but they've lost a couple games, you can sort of, I think that's why they've been underrated, right? They've been playing fast and they're losing coin flips, so they go down. Cloud9, I think, given their talent differential, and to your point, really more their play style, there is a talent differential, but the reason the gap is so big is the play style.
Yeah. Yep, I think that's pretty accurate. So that's North America. Let's go to the LEC. Okay, so do you want to go first on the LEC?
Sure. Broxa is what EGOT doesn't like.
Don't blame him.
I'm sure everyone was sitting on pins and needles trying to get the answer. Okay. LEC starting at the bottom. We have a new bottom team in the EGOT rankings for the LEC with Misfits at the bottom. Schalke with the double W's moves into ninth, and really into a separate tier almost from Misfits, along with Origin in eighth and Vitality in seventh. Next tier up is SK, then XL. Rogue kind of in a tier by itself in fourth, and then Mad Lions in third, Fnatic in second, and G2 in first. Uh, not much change in terms of the separation for G2, despite the loss. And yeah, I think Mad Lions got punished for their loss more than Fnatic did, basically, just given the matchup.
Sure. So, on Sunday, when they were talking about the Misfits versus Schalke matchup, they led into the game with some kind of narrative that Froskuren thought that Misfits was actually the worst team in the LEC instead of Schalke, and that is it's kind of a ridiculous claim in my opinion. I think that talent-wise, Misfits they have something that they can kind of salvage and be good next year, but they really need to upgrade their shot calling, their macro game ability, and probably their support. Maybe also their jungler or top lane. But when you have Fabivin and Kabe, I think you do have a good starting spot for a team. Kabe didn't succeed on TSM, and maybe he's actually just a problem. He actually does seem kind of passive aggressive, but I don't know enough about him to really criticize him. Schalke, I don't see Schalke being much better, even though they have a 10-man roster and some relatively young players. Origin, they had their chance to separate themselves from the pack after going 2-0 in the previous week, but they lost both of their matches this weekend, so they were kind of they're kind of brought back down to earth. SK, Vitality, and XL, I think they're all pretty similar. So in my rankings, I have Origin, SK, Misfits, XL, and Vitality pretty close. If Misfits played Schalke again, I would pick Misfits again. Like I'm not gonna let that one game scare me off of Misfits. And then for the top four, I have Mad Lions in first, G2 in second, Rogue in third, and Fnatic in fourth. G2's win in that game over... who did they make that comeback win against? Was that Rogue or Mad Lions? It was their second game this weekend, because on Saturday they lost to Schalke, and then Sunday they had a huge comeback. Rogue, yeah. So that is the kind of game that you need to take a look at to really appreciate G2's never say die attitude, because that's the reason why they look bad in their losses, but it's also why they have the chance to make a comeback. So they went for a very low percentage play around Baron, trying to steal Baron after their jungler died, and it worked. So it was a super low percentile play, but it worked, and they were able to team fight correctly moving forward in the game. The one thing I would say about G2, which is why I put Mad Lions above them, is that Perkz looks really, really, really bad right now relative to how he normally plays. He has a lot of big positioning mistakes and decision-making mistakes. So it's basically bad decisions that lead to bad positioning, and that scares me a lot, especially on the world stage. One thing that comes to mind specifically is when he was standing under the mid-tier 2 and was just dove. Like, he just didn't even respond. So it's like, there were a couple times where I was watching Perkz and just thinking to myself, like, what the hell is this guy actually doing? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So I think
Jenko seems to be having sort of a down split as well, right?
Yeah, so I think they're both just not playing very well right now. Jankos last year was like a Rek'Sai, Olaf, Trundle, played some Pantheon in the jungle, is a very good aggressive early game jungler. Like, he's known as the first blood king in LEC, which means he's going to get the first kill in basically every game that he plays. But they just didn't play the same way. Like, Perkz plus Jankos in jungle plus mid was very good. Jankos plus Caps is much more like reserved. They're not making the same amount of aggressive plays and stuff like that. Maybe it has something to do with champion pools. I'm really not sure, but I don't have much more to say about the LEC. I think that we've done a good job with the LEC in general, and I don't expect the rankings to change very much the rest of the season, because we kind of know we basically think we know who these teams are at this point. At least I do.
Maybe some juggle. Yeah, maybe some flip flopping within the tiers, but I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
On Schalke, just what about Gilius? You think he has is? I feel like he's probably the best player on that roster. At least for again, I view all this stuff through a DraftKings fantasy lens.
Yeah, Gilius has always been known as a high volatility, potentially carry jungler, which is what we want on this in this meta specifically. But so much of the spring and so much of what I anticipate is going to happen at Worlds is not going to be a carry jungle meta. So he is a Lee Sin player, so you can think of him as like a Karsa, where no matter what the meta is, he can always play something like Lee Sin, be hyper aggressive in the early game, and then look for late game picks, like onto a priority target like the AD carry or the mid laner. But it's a very risky way to play and a risky way to draft, because if you cannot find that opportunity, if the players are playing conservative and safe, you're not going to be able to find a way back into the game necessarily. So it's safer to go for like a scaling option that can do front to back team fighting, and kind of play it right down the middle, as opposed to having this wide range of outcomes. I don't think Gilius is a long term solution for anybody. Lurox actually looked pretty good in spring, but for one reason or another, just they haven't had a lot of success with Lurox, so they want to like put their best foot forward in the rest of the summer, and Gilius is going to let them do that, which isn't that surprising. Yeah. It would be like in the NBA if you had a point guard that's like 36 or 37 years old and he can't really run anymore. He's not a great shooter, but he's a very good distributor, so they always run him out with the starters. He gets like 15 minutes, and then you have the young guy doing everything else. Like, I think Gilius is more like the older point guard who's kind of starting because they know that he'll be able to keep things kind of on the right path for now, but they plan on getting rid of him. I'm almost positive about that.
Yeah, and I think you just to close it, I think the carry jungler point, it's sort of my numbers really like carry junglers, and I think it's sort of on an individual scale, the same thing we were talking about on the team scale, right? It's these high volatility players that can pop off. I mentioned Weiwei last week in the LPL as another guy that always shows up in my numbers for the same reason. He may have one game where he gets killed 10 times, but the game where he has 10 kills for DraftKings purposes is 3 times as valuable.
Yeah, it's like a defensive back in the NFL that is always looking for opportunities to get a pick, right? They're going to get burned sometimes. They're going to get burned sometimes and give up a touchdown, but other times they'll make a miraculous pick and win the game for their team. So
yeah, Marcus Peters.
Yeah, sure, Marcus Peters, exactly, somebody like that. So let's go to the LCK. In the LCK, I'll just go through the tiers real quick. The two worst teams in the LCK are still Hanwha Life and Seoul Haewon Prince. There's no debating that really at this point. I think Viper and Lehens, they are very talented, but the question marks on the top half of the map haven't been figured out. They're still trying different iterations of the roster. That's not good. And then on Seoul Haewon Prince, we have Mickey, but all we have is Mickey. So that's unlucky. The next 3 teams in the C tier are KT Rolster, Team Dynamics, and Sandbox. Sandbox and the Fighting Yamato Cannons, they're not good compared to most of the other teams in the league. I wouldn't be shocked if they beat a team like KT Rolster or Team Dynamics, but like if we go into the playoffs and they're matched up against one of the teams that's ranked ahead of them, I'm going to pick the other team every single time. Maybe I'm extremely biased against Sandbox Gaming. Who knows? I can't help that at this point. It's just too funny to impersonate Yamato Cannon, and I'm not giving that up. Team Dynamics.
But if they make the playoffs, that gives you one more week to throw off the impression. So you might want to think about balancing the scales there.
Well, if Sandbox misses, then I could just pretend that Yamato Cannon was fired and is now a full-time employee of League of Items, and then I can use his voice all the time.
Yeah, sort of a win-win for you.
Exactly. I try to get those situations often. So Team Dynamics and KT Rolster, I think they're both better than Sandbox, but worse than a Freak of Freaks. Tough to differentiate between the two. I mentioned this on my other video about Team Dynamics, that they are a little bit older than you would think they are, even though they're a rookie team. So I don't really like their long-term prospects that much. They're going to have to revamp this entire roster at some point. KT Rolster, aiming is very good. and young, but the rest of the team is win now and older, and they're not going to win now, so they have to kind of start looking towards the future as well. UCal and aiming is going to be a nice core for the future, but they're not that good right now. Afrika Freaks, they're better than all these other teams, but that's not saying much because they're not even close to the top four. The top four, we have DRX, Damwon Gaming, T1, and Gen G. Somebody on my video from yesterday said, I think Gen G should be in the A tier. And I didn't really have a good response to that because I kind of agree with them. Gen G, I like BDD, I like Ruler, I like Clid. But they have shown a weakness when playing against these top teams. They continuously throw objectives. They continuously give up comeback victories to the other team. They've done it to T1. They've done it to DRX. There's not much to say about the rest of the teams, though. They're like undeniably some of the top teams in the world. Some people might think that T1 should also be lower, but I'm not doing that. They have Faker.
Yeah. This could just be me taking a walk down narrative street because I don't really have anything to back this up. But it feels like the LCK over the last 3 weeks, we've seen a lot of sort of teams playing to the level of their competition. That like you just see some of these good teams take nights off, or the bad teams play up to them a little bit.
Yeah.
That sort of, I think, in terms of the records, confuse things or condense things a little bit, but that I agree, and certainly the ego numbers agree that it's those top 4 teams and everybody else. Right now I have Damwon up top, Gen G and DRX really close together behind them, but a little bit of a gap. Another little bit of a gap to T1, which just I think continues to fall. They're the main team I'm thinking of when I was saying what I just said.
Yeah.
KT comes in 5th in my numbers. They've just been, I might have said this last week, whereas these other bottom teams in the LCK in these numbers sort of sometimes go a little above average, sometimes go well below average. KT is just sort of holding steady, and the rest of these teams are in a little bit of a lull state. And so they hold the 5th spot almost by default. Afrika Freaks in 6th, Sandbox in 7th, Hanwha in 8th, Team Dynamics in 9th, which surprises me. They're a team that I don't know. I think I have a soft spot for them because they played in the promotion series and it was like the only thing that was on for a week, so I got real invested in them.
Yeah.
And then SP in the basement. So yeah. Look, I think any of those sort of bottom 6 teams could end up being the 5th playoff team, other than probably SP. I actually don't even know where they are in the standings. So just in terms of talent, putting aside who can leapfrog who in these last couple of weeks.
Yeah. I think so. What you said about teams playing to the level of their competition, I think it's accurate, but it might not be accurate for the reason that you were kind of implying at first. So what I said earlier was the LCS would benefit from having 3-game series, 3-game series instead of best of ones, and I think the reason is because the more you see a team, the more you're going to give them the benefit of the doubt when playing against a good team. Well, not the benefit of the doubt. You're going to see how much closer they are to the best teams than you might think they are in a best of one. So if TSM played against Cloud9 in a best of one and got stomped in one game, everybody's confirmation bias says, oh, C9 is so much better than TSM. Screw TSM, they're garbage. If they played 3 games and TSM kept one of the games close and won another game and then lost the 3rd game, people would be like, oh, yeah, TSM actually had really good chances at winning that match. They just got a little unlucky in this one interaction, but, they're actually pretty good. And we see that in the LPL. So what I was going to say is LCS it's tough because it's best of ones. LCK, I think, is similar in terms of talent disparity or talent parity. I think they're a lot closer than it probably seems at first glance, but having 3 games instead of best of ones allows the variance to be reduced, because it's like, well, if you have a 70% chance to win every single game, then you're going to win the match more often, which is just better in my opinion. And then in the LPL we have 17 teams, so we have these 7 teams basically that are just getting shit on by everybody, and even though they're best of 3s, you can tell there's a gigantic difference between them and the rest of the league. So like, if you had a 10-team league in the LPL where the worst team was like EDG or something like that, then you would see a lot more parity. And I think everyone's opinions would be closer. But that's basically it. Let's go to the LPL. What were you going to say?
No, just that it makes sense.
Yeah. I thought so. All right. now we have the LPL. So I'll run through this one quickly. The two worst teams in the LPL are LNG and Dominus. The next clump of teams are RNG, Rogue Warriors, Billy Gaming, OMG, and eStar. The next group is Vici Gaming and EDG, which I think is significantly better than RNG and everybody else in terms of how they're playing right now. Not necessarily in terms of talent over RNG, but there are some just real problems with RNG. Their top laner specifically. Then we have in the A tier FPX, V5, Sunning, LGD, and Team World Elite. I'm not giving up on FPX yet. It might burn me in the long run, but it probably won't burn me that much because a lot of these slates are so small. But FPX, I mean, long-term talent, you kind of have to leave them up here, give them the benefit of the doubt for a decent amount of time. And then, so Sunning, I think Sunning, when they play FPX, it's going to give us a lot of information about how these teams are going to shake out. I think LGD and World Elite are a little bit worse than FPX, V5, and Sunning, but tough to create an argument either way. And then the three best teams in the league, I think, which have kind of separated themselves, are Top Esports, Invictus Gaming, and JDG.
Yeah, perhaps because of the better picture that these 3-game series provide us, we are once again aligned pretty much on the rankings here. Although I will throw in one lukewarm take and one hot take at the very end here. I'm just scrolling through. Rogue Warriors is in between Dominus and LNG at the bottom of my rankings. We've talked about the reason why they suffer here. Team WE is another one that is low in my rankings. I don't really understand why. They keep falling despite the fact that they win. So I'm not really sure what that is all about. Vici, then eStar, then FPX, which is a little bit lower in my rankings just because they haven't been playing as well.
Yeah.
EDG took a big jump from being sort of in 3-4 teams down to just above FPX with the win last night. They just pounded sort of, again, what you were talking about. They pounded LNG and got rewarded in the rankings for that.
Yeah.
OMG, LGD, Suning in 5th, V5, and then a big gap between them and those top 3 teams. IG at this point is still in 3rd, but is just behind Top Esports and JDG, and those two it's razor thin. They change in the rankings every single day based on who wins the previous night's games and what that does to strength of schedule. The two takes that I have, the lukewarm take, which I would is actually my view. I think LGD beats FPX tonight. So I would take LGD over that. I think they're a slight dog right now. And then the hot take, which is more numbers based, but if you played out the rest of the LPL schedule based on where the EGOT standings are right now and gave the win to the higher ranked team, FPX would miss the playoffs and RNG would make the playoffs. FPX losing tonight and then to Suning on the final day of the season. RNG, they have Top Esports, but the rest of their closeout schedule is really soft. I think it's like BLG, DMO, and Rogue. So that would tie them record-wise, and it would come down to their record in individual matches in the series.
Interesting. I think that FPX will be able to take one of these next two matches. I think that against LGD, top lane, it doesn't matter if they play Khan or Gimgoon. I think they're both better than Wangxi. In the jungle, Tian against Peanut. I do probably prefer Peanut a little bit, but Tian is a world champion and was a big part of why they won the world championship. Xie against Duanbi. Gotta prefer Duanbi in my mind. And then in the bot lane, we have Kramer and Zhao Meng against LWX and Crisp. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of LWX or Crisp, but I still think that they're better than Kramer. Wait, did I say Zhao Meng? Zhao Meng's the AD carry for World Elite. Kramer and Mark. So I think that stylistically, I just prefer FPX over LGD. But I do think the talent is relatively close, and maybe I'm a little biased because they won the World Championship. But that's kind of where I'm at on that one.
Yeah. My pick, the pick tonight, I just have more visibility on because I've started to do a little work on the slate for tonight. So
Sure.
so that one, I sort of trust the numbers more than the RNG thing. And then the flip side of that is also, I've mentioned a couple times, FPX is probably my favorite team at this point. So hoping for a little bit of a reverse jinx by putting the kibosh on them.
Word. All right. Well, we have the. Do you have a top 10 prepared?
I don't have it prepared, but I think I can just copy and paste and.
All right. Because I need to rearrange a few things on this list. Basically, from the graphics that I've been showing throughout the video, everybody in the S tier and the A tier, I'm going to go over in this next portion of the video. I'm eliminating everybody from B, C, and D. So these are most likely the pool of teams that we will get for the World Championship from these regions, barring some kind of dark horse performances in the playoffs, which obviously could happen. I'm not saying that they will or will not, but right now this is kind of what it looks like, and we can rank these teams accordingly. So we'll start whenever you have your list of top 10 or 12 or whatever. Just let me know when you're ready to start that up. By the way, I think I just experienced a slight earthquake during that last segment. I froze partway through it, and that's why. My floor was
That's
rumbling.
crazy. That's not something you usually have to worry about in North Jersey.
Yeah, one time I was asleep when I lived at my parents' house. I was probably about 19, and we had like a legit earthquake. It was pretty crazy. It wasn't like entire house shaking earthquake, but you could feel the tremors. It was pretty shocking.
Yeah, we had the only time I've ever experienced one. There was a freak one in Philadelphia when I was in law school, and I was sitting in my bed reading, like middle of the day, and I lived on like in Center City, so you like a bunch of traffic and buses and stuff going on all the time, in like a row home, and so there was a bus route down my street, and so like 2-3 times an hour bus would go by, and it's like the big car that goes by fast, and you sort of hear it like through the window. And so at first I thought it was that, and I'm like, oh, here comes the bus, and then it just kept going, and I was like, what the fuck, and like everything shook. So I was like, what do I do? I'm like, oh, like doorway. And so like I ran, and like then my roommate came down from upstairs. What the fuck was that?
Yeah, I didn't even have enough time to like realize what was going on. It was more of like a, hey, earlier today, did you feel that like rumbling? And then you ask enough people, and one of them goes, oh yeah, that was an earthquake. They talked about it on the news. So I'll get this started.
Yeah, I'm just about ready here, so I'll
Sure.
be able to chime in whenever you are good.
Sure. So
Yeah,
basically,
okay.
the first 4 teams. I guess I could start with the LCS. So I think out of all these regions, I think the LCS is the weakest region right now. Team Liquid is in this position because they beat Cloud9 recently, and they deserve that lip service, even if I don't think they have a realistic chance of going far at the World Championship. And I honestly do think that Evil Geniuses has more talent than Team Liquid. So in the playoffs, if we got Team Liquid against Evil Geniuses, I would be taking a shot on Evil Geniuses. I think that the consistency of Team Liquid is going to have the public on TL instead. So I would happily take that side of the matchup. Do you even have LCS? Do you even have TL that high in the rankings right now?
I do not. So I'm sorry. What are you looking at? Or you're just reading off? I was just trying to pull up what you have.
So it's that picture that I sent you through Twitter yesterday. So I'm taking all the teams from the S tier and the A tier. So I mean, I guess the thing that we could do first is you tell me which teams in the S tier and A tier are in your rankings as well, and that'll
Sure.
start the elimination process.
Yeah. So I missed some of your intro on sort of the projected world stuff, so I apologize for that. But yeah, so we went through in last week's video some of the biases and kinks that I haven't worked out in these cross league comparisons yet. The sort of elevator pitch version of that is that the LCK, I think, is probably justifiably the top team, but is overrated in terms of the adjustment that LCK teams are given. And similarly, the LCS is, I think, probably justified the bottom team or bottom league by these rankings, but is adjusted too low. So on the Team Liquid question, like the bottom, 5 or 6 teams in these combined rankings are all LCS teams, and Team Liquid clocks in at 38th out of 47 teams in the 4 divisions. So that, I think, again, I think 47th is too low, but I think the earlier statement, they're my 5th team in the LCS in the EGOT rankings. So I think they would, any team you put them up against, I think I'm also on the other side of it at Worlds, unless it's, maybe if one of the LEC teams from that mid-tier sneaks in, I could see it. But
sure.
But generally, I agree.
So out of the other teams that you have in like the top 10 roughly, which teams are on my list as well? You can go like 10 to 1 or 1 to 10, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, 10 to 1. I go Suning 10, Cloud9 9, Victory 5 8, IG 7, Top Esports 6, JDG 5, and then the 4 LCK teams 1 2 3 4. In order: T14, DRX3, Gen G2, Dam11.
Interesting. So you do not have Mad Lions, FPX, LGD, Rogue, Fnatic, G2, or Team World Elite?
Not in my top 10, but the order of those other teams here would be G2. LGD would be the first among those, then G2, then FPX, then Fnatic, then WE, then Mad Lions, then Rogue. Did I miss anybody?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Nope, that's it. So, okay.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I do think that we're gonna have to do something about the LCK, because like, I do think that they are all quality teams, but I don't think that they are consistent enough to beat the upside given to the LPL teams based on their volatility. You know what I mean? So like the aggression coming out of the LPL is going to put teams like Gen G into a lot of bad situations where they have to make a very important macro decision, and the same way that they fail against DRX or Team 1, I would expect them to kind of like have the question asked so many times that they eventually make a gigantic mistake. So if I had Gen G going up against FPX in a head-to-head, I would probably be on FPX. Just stylistically, I think that's a good matchup for FPX.
Interesting. Yeah. Look, I agree with the right now, just, the way FPX is playing, I might be on Gen G in that specific matchup.
Yeah.
Just sort of, again, I'm just coming at this straight by the numbers, because I just don't have the insight you do in terms of the actual matchup here. Mm-hmm. But in terms of your broader statement, I completely agree. Perhaps once again, just viewing all of this through a sort of DFS centric lens, I like the LPL play style better. It lends itself to higher scoring, and I think it's just more exciting to watch.
Yeah.
So it may just be that bias sneaking through, rather than, an actual analysis of the what that means for the matchup. But yeah, I agree that the LPL team should be higher.
Yeah. And I think the other observation I would take away from this is that Cloud9 being as dominant as they have been in the LCS is probably reflected why they're able to crack the top 10 and the teams from the LEC are not able to. I think G2, Fnatic, Mad Lions, and Rogue, I'm not sure where C9 would kind of match up with most of those teams. I think if Mad Lions played against C9, the money line would probably be favored. I think Mad Lions would probably be favored at this point from the sports book, and it would probably be like minus 120 to minus 105, or one of those like really annoying lines to bet on, where like there's nothing on either side, and it's just like, do you want to make a bet? Well, then make a bet. So I think that's probably the only problem I would really have. I do think that the LCK and the LPL are much better than the LEC and the LCS right now. And I think part of that probably has to do with the larger sample size that we have, the number of games we can watch. But overall, I think the top 10 teams that we have up here are close enough. Good enough for city work, as they say.
Certainly.
So that's about it. Are there any other observations you wanted to make about the Ego rankings or some of the matches you're looking forward to next week?
I just pulled up the schedules to try and take a peek, but hadn't really gotten into that yet. I saw that they put out some patch notes for 10-16 for the playoff patch. Did you get a look at that at all?
So I think 10-16 is probably going to be a tweak patch. I think that's what they said. Or actually, they might have said that it was going to be a bigger patch. That
it's a lot. It seems like a lot of changes, but the description was a lot of small changes. Focused on pro plays, just sort of nerfing like the people we're seeing in every single match right now, and Nimbus Cloak, which everyone's taking apparently. Again, the one significant change, at least it was just like the sheet that one of the developers put out, was they're going to buff Evelynn so that she's lane viable.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know how that's going to work out. It's because she's so... The way to make her lane viable is to make her blind pickable, and she's not really blind pickable ever because her health pool is so small. She does have some good health regeneration, I think, which they might try to amplify that to make her sustain in lane. But like, I couldn't see her surviving most mid lane matchups, because if like you blind pick Evelynn on blue 4, blue 5, like you're familiar with draft terminology at this point, right? Where like if you're watching a draft and it's like blue side, red side, the 4th and 5th picks for the blue side are considered blue 4, blue 5. So if your blue team, I think you're basically never going to be able to pick Evelynn, because you would give the other team the option to counter pick into the Evelynn. So Evelynn has like no long range. She has extremely short range. She's a melee champion, and like she can shoot out Qs. She can use a charm to like lure people into her, but she is going to get poked out really hard by most of the champions that are in the meta right now. So Azir, Orianna, Zoe, Syndra, all 4 of those champions should have a pretty good matchup against her. And they're also going to provide a lot more in regards to late game team fights and like playing as a team, as opposed to Evelynn, which is more of like a flanker assassin where she's kind of going to do her own thing. Maybe that's helpful in like a pick composition around objectives, but it seems way too difficult. Like one thing that people often talk about with drafting is the ease of execution, and I think if you're drafting something like Evelynn, unless she's broken and out of control, it's probably not going to be worth it. I'm excited for the patch that's following that one. The Worlds patch will be very interesting because what's that?
It will 10-17 most likely be the Worlds patch.
Yeah, probably. So they try to give it to teams with a decent amount of runway so that they can kind of figure out things. There have been a few years where they make like gigantic changes that really kind of mess with everything. But I think that there was a lot of blowback the last time that happened, so they'll probably be a little bit more measured in how they approach it. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. That's one of the best parts about League of Legends, is how it's always kind of changing little by little.
It definitely keeps it fresh, and has been that, and then I guess the other thing that I really like, I'm not a big soccer fan, So I was very excited about the prospect of following a sport that had relegation games. So I'm disappointed that maybe that's another reason why I'm a Team Dynamics fan, because they won the relegation. It feels like they earned their spot in LCK, which I appreciate. So disappointed those are going away, but that's neither here nor there at this point. Yeah, and so I think maybe just to close it out, I obviously the cross league comparisons need some work. I think they provide some directional accuracy. As you said, probably top 10 teams are about right, but a lot of work in terms of just sorting and beyond that, which I probably will get to after the split is over, because for now the only time I use it is when we're having these fun discussions. But
I think
doesn't really.
I think that in terms of like, even if it was just like a threshold thing where every team that gets past this threshold should be considered for a top 10 spot, and then you sort afterwards with like manipulating it by hand and using a lot of the intuitive stuff. But it's a good starting point either way.
Yeah, this is like pre-beta. It's not even beta yet. So I have ideas written down on little scraps of paper all over the place. So maybe one of those has something to it. So we'll see. We'll figure something out.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Billy, anything else you want to say, or are you good to go?
I'm good to go. Good luck, everybody.
Bye-bye.